Many of you are experts at behavioral interviewing without even realizing, because so long as you have no challenges answering those tell me about the time when types of questions, you should be good enough to go. But let's not forget an essential detail here. Employers are not screening candidates because they want to see if you're good at behavioral interviewing, but they're screening you because they want to see if you're the best fit for the role. So let's look at an example here. Let's say you're a finance manager applying for this role in the context of Amazon, and you're getting asked the following question. Tell me about a time when you had to deal with a difficult customer, or what's your most difficult customer here? And you say, oh yes, definitely, I remember about a very interesting deal that I did while working at my bank. It was only 6 months ago when I had a customer interested in a $500 million loan from our bank, and I knew that this is going to be complicated simply because, the customer had a lot of choice. There were so many banks that were not against lending the money. So I offered him the best possible deal that my bank offered. Of course, keeping an eye on what other banks were offering, and of course, the customer tried to negotiate even better terms here, but I knew, I knew their limits. So I literally studied very well this, and I knew this was actually something they were ultimately going to accept. And this was a very complicated deal, and it took us 6 months to pull it through. But in the end, the customer was approved the loan, and I did money for my bank. So this would be the initial answer. Now, what could be a follow-up question here? Now, a follow-up question could be, okay, but was this a difficult customer? Why was this a difficult customer? And the answer could be, yeah, of course it was. I mean, it was one of the biggest deals I had to pull through, and the customer, had a lot of choice. So I really had to go above and beyond to ensure that this would be a deal that would be successful, especially for me and for my bank. And I'm looking here of one of the main highlights in my career, essentially. And then the interviewer would ask you a second follow-up question. Is there anything you wish you could have done differently here, maybe? And, a normal answer would be, well, I'm not sure if of course, probably I could have even negotiated a better deal, although I'm not sure about how risky that better deal, those better conditions for my bank to approve that loan would have been, because you see, after all, I had to, the question here was to offer them more guarantees, and I know other banks would have likely taken this customer from us in this situation. So yes, all in all, of course, there's always room to improve on the negotiating side, but I think essentially this was a very strong deal. Now, some of you might have already noticed that this was not a great answer simply because the question was on the leadership principle of customer obsession. Now, from experience and from coaching many people for especially important roles in these companies, I know that customer obsession is not a priority for many, many huge companies that I'm sure you've heard of. Notice how the initial answer, how the original answer was all about making money, all about being profitable for the bank, for your employer, and notice the subtle reference to other banks, to their competitors, right? So if you'll read a little bit of literature about Amazon, or even the leadership principle, I think, says that they are aware of the competitors but obsess over the customer, whereas here the behavior was more like, look at the competitors, be careful that they don't take out the customer, and be sure that you make money for the bank. Now, no one's saying, it's a bad idea to make money for your employer, not by far. But it's a huge difference from from providing customer support at best when compared to customer obsession. Right? Now, notice a few more elements here that might not be as straightforward to understand. Notice how the interviewer followed up, and I genuinely believe these follow-up questions are well intended. They asked you, was this a difficult customer? And the reason why they asked you this is because they wanted to see how you look at a difficult customer, whereas actually, that's how you went deeper. That's how I went deeper into the example to say that, yeah, they were difficult to get their money, to get a good deal for the bank. So I was always thinking about myself and my employer, not about the customer here. So I emphasized again my obsession on whatever else but the customer here. And then it went even further with asking you and essentially trying to get you out of this trap, like anything you'd wish you've done differently here. And again, don't think as the interviewer, especially at Amazon, being someone against you. No, the interviewer is with you. It's just that you must be really good at listening these things. So they ask you this, is there anything you'd wish you'd done differently? And automatically the reflex of the candidate is, how on earth could I have made more money here? Right? So notice the behavior is very far from a candidate interested in customer obsession in this scenario. And this is the primary reason why this is a very bad and, a deadly mistake. And this actually happened with someone. And actually, there are many examples of, not exhibiting customer obsession because the candidate's background is one such that does not promote this, or simply the candidate is not like this, doesn't work like this, right? And if you remember the first note that I made in the beginning of this video is that employers look for a fit for this role. So the main takeaways from this would be, of course, the customer obsession is customer obsession, but even further here, the best candidates that invariably get jobs are also the candidates that really know to read through the lines and know how to listen. So ensure that you listen properly to whatever your interviewer is saying and telling you, and remember they are usually on your side during these things. Now, don't take their advice for granted. Don't take, if they tell you you'll be asked, pick one of these questions. If they give you some examples of questions to prepare for your interview, it doesn't mean those questions will get asked. Not by far, so don't take them ad literam, but try to understand what they're actually looking for from the initial question that they ask you, which will be more often than not on leadership principle, to the follow-ups, to how the conversation evolves. And don't expect them to tell you, hey, you're not a good fit for this role because you don't show customer obsession, because that would be an invitation for you to try to fake it until you make it. So that's why, these interviews can feel misleading, and that's why you must pay particular attention to what the interviewer is actually looking for from you, and ideally to adjust. If you have that emotional intelligence in interview, to adjust and correct that behavior, because, we're talking about a pretty senior role. It was a senior finance manager here. So long as you adjust on these details, very important details for Amazon, you are likely to simply course correct and get the job. But the main thing is read your interviewer and understand very, very well. Take your time to think why they ask you these questions in the first place.